Hello, classic rock fans. Today is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to try something I haven't done before. I'm going to vlog. We're going to talk about some stuff that is in the news, in the world of classic rock, and I'm going to run through a story that's interesting to me and give you my take on it. Yes, I am going to get into the world of takes. I have them for you, some of them hot, some perhaps not so hot, but takes nonetheless. So let's get started with a fun subject. Today's topic is going to be Van Halen. I love Van Halen. They're one of my favorite bands. Most classic rock fans like Van Halen. And they are in the news a lot. Seemingly every couple of months, one of them will say something about one of the others, and it'll make the news for whatever reason. They've been doing it like this since the 80s, so let's take a look at the most recent thing that was said and flesh the idea out a little bit. Okay, so last month, June 2017, Sammy Hagar was talking to Rolling Stone magazine, and he said he is open to the idea of reuniting with Van Halen. But he had a condition. He said he would only reunite if it was not just with the brothers and original bassist Michael Anthony, but with David Lee Roth as well. So the idea for Sammy's reunion would be that Alex Van Halen would be on drums, obviously, Eddie Van Halen would play guitar, Michael Anthony would come back into the band and play bass and replace Wolfie, who's currently in the band. That's Eddie's son, Wolfie Van Halen. And then Sam and Dave would both be in the band singing on stage together. Like, Dave would come out and do 2 David Lee Roth songs, and then Sammy would be on stage, and then he would sing 2 Sammy Hagar songs. Dave would get 2 songs, Sammy would get 2 songs, and that's how they would do the whole concert. In a nutshell, like, that is exactly what a lot of Van Halen fans, that's a dream come true for them, because most classic rock fans like at least some work from both of these guys. It's not all split down the middle. It's not all just David Lee Roth fans or just Sammy Hagar fans. I think most classic rock fans like songs from both, and a tour like this would give both singers a chance to play their songs, and you could hear them from the original artist, or original vocalist, I should say. In the past, when Sammy fronted the band, he would sing some Dave songs, but not many. And since Dave's been back in the band, he will not sing any Sammy songs whatsoever. So Sammy's ideas, I'll just say it, I think it's fucking awesome. I think it's a really cool idea. And I think a lot of fans like that idea. So the whole point of this video is I want to explore and flesh out, at least from a fan's perspective, is it possible for this even to happen? Is it likely that it's going to happen? Or is he just kind of shooting his mouth off, you know? Because reunions are tough. You can look at Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath did their farewell tour, and one of them, the drummer, sat out the whole thing because they couldn't reconcile, and I think that was over money. But on the flip side, somehow Axl Rose and Slash mended the bridge, and they're touring right now, you know, as almost the original lineup of Guns N' Roses. So if the Guns N' Roses can make it work, and the Eagles, when Glenn Frey was still alive, the Eagles made it work, you know, starting in 1994, and they had a terrible breakup. So bands have reconciled, you know, it's not impossible. I've always followed Van Halen very closely, so I think I can speak to the likelihood of that happening or not. Before we get into whether it's going to happen, let's talk about why Sammy even brought this up in the first place. For those who are fans of him or follow him, you know that he's a pretty busy guy. He's got a whole liquor business, and fronts like 3 separate bands. So why is he suddenly talking about wanting to get back into Van Halen, which he left on very bad terms twice? So he said that he doesn't want anything negative in his life anymore. He doesn't want to be feuding with the Van Halens. He wants to reconcile. He wants them to be friends again, or at least on good terms. And he's also said that, you know, his years in Van Halen marked like the height of his career, at least commercially. So he knows he's very connected to that band. He knows his legacy as an artist is intrinsically connected to that band. And there's probably a level of wanting to let water be under the bridge and, you know, be friends again. So that 2004 reunion tour he did with the Van Halens, pretty much an unmitigated disaster, very well publicized that it didn't go well, it didn't go according to plan. So a lot of animosity. So the idea is he's probably looking for some degree of closure, and a tour like that would absolutely do that. So it's a very popular idea, and I can see why he would want to do it. And Michael Anthony has been asked about it, and he's right on board with it. In fact, I imagine they talked about that idea. Maybe that's where the idea came from, is them talking about it. Michael Anthony has said that he wants to play with them again too, but it wouldn't be the worst if he didn't. He's pretty much a team player, no matter what the issue is. But he said he likes the idea that Sammy put forward. So those two are the best of friends. They're probably going to agree on whatever the idea is, but, you know, it's something. So I think the idea is pretty good. I think that it would be a really fun idea. I think the fans would love it. I personally would absolutely go see that show. And I like that Sammy is not afraid to share the stage with not only Eddie, who he famously bickered with, but Dave. Rock stars always have huge egos. So he's not saying, you know, oh, the Van Halen should toss Dave out and put me back in. He's saying, no, let's do it both. Let's do it even. That's what the fans would want. And he's right. I think most fans would really get into that. Now, there's plenty of Roth fans who would hate it, but, you know, whatever. You know, they've had 10 years now with Dave back in the band only, and, you know, why not just enjoy that? I mean, if you're a David Lee Roth fan and you've had many chances to go see him play with the band, whereas if you're a Sammy Hagar fan and you want to see him with the Van Halens, you got one shot in like 2004, and that would have been a terrible show for the most part. And then that's it. That's it. That in 2004. You know, that's over 10 years ago. So I think there's a lot of Van Halen fans who would like to see Sam back with the band. So the question here, the important question, is how likely is this to happen? And then this is where my take comes in. And my take on this is I think it's highly unlikely to happen, unfortunately. I think it would be awesome if it did, but there's a lot of reasons why the reunion probably won't happen. Before I get into why I don't think it could happen, let's talk about some of the positives, because it's not black or white. There are some things that are promising, and if you want this reunion to happen, you can at least feel good. There's a couple of things that would have to happen that have happened. The main positive with this idea is Michael Anthony. It's not just that he's on board. Michael Anthony said that, I believe last year in 2016, he had a conversation for the first time in like 10 years with drummer Alex Van Halen. And he said it was a very positive experience. They had a good talk. He didn't say what they talked about, but he just said for the first time, probably, I think, since that disaster of the tour in 2004, he spoke on the phone with Alex Van Halen. That's really good, because for all this time since that '04 reunion, Mikey and Sammy have always said that they are totally cut off from the Van Halen brothers, and they have no contact with those guys. So even if it's just a phone call, that's good. And what's even more impressive is that Mikey and David Lee Roth have been in contact too. In fact, David Lee Roth donated some $10,000 to a charity that's being run by Mikey's family. So Roth donates this money, Mikey emails him, they have some exchange, online, and yeah, it was totally this great show of charity, and that's promising too. That's a great gesture of goodwill on David Lee Roth's part, and that seemingly came out of the blue. Mikey said he was absolutely not expecting it, and to add to that, over the last 10 years, David Lee Roth has said, I think to Rolling Stone or Howard Stern, that he would actually like to see Mikey back in the band as well. He said he really liked singing with Michael Anthony. He said that he misses his bass playing. So I don't think there's any animosity between David Lee Roth and Michael Anthony. And presumably none between Alex Van Halen and Michael Anthony either. So if they're talking to Mikey, he might be a stepping stone to Sammy, Maybe Sammy and Alex, they used to be really good friends. Maybe they start talking, I don't know about Roth and Hagar, but, it's a start. So as far as positives go, that's about it. The positives are that it's a really good idea, and no one, except maybe Eddie, but I can't even say him for sure, have a problem with Michael Anthony. I think there's two major roadblocks on this idea of a super reunion. The relationship between Sammy Hagar and Eddie Van Halen, and we'll call it relationship between Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth. Those two aspects are basically what would prevent the reunion from happening, because there's a lot of baggage with both. So let's talk about Sammy's relationship with Eddie Van Halen first. Let's just tackle that all here. For starters, in 2011, Sammy put out his book in which he totally trashed Eddie Van Halen. Dragged him totally through the mud, put all the dirty laundry out there. Eddie Van Halen comes off terribly in this book. Drunk, mean-spirited, irresponsible, disrespectful, just everything bad is Eddie Van Halen in Sam's book. Sam talks about Eddie and the whole Van Halen world pretty much any interview he's in. Interviewers love asking Sammy about Van Halen because he's always open to talking about it. This is not true for Eddie or even David Lee Roth. There's very few interviews I'm even aware of that Eddie talks about Sammy on any level. The only thing I was aware of was an interview Eddie did in 2015 with Billboard magazine, where he acknowledged Sammy's book, and he said a lot of it was embellished and a good deal never happened. So he disputed the book a little bit. So that was June of 2015, and in that same interview, he threw some shade at Michael Anthony for some reason, saying that he had to show Mikey how to play bass. He had to set up a video camera and record all the bass parts that he wanted Mikey to play on the Van Halen records. That is, according to at least Mikey and Sammy, not true. It seems like a weird thing to say because Mikey is a well-known, accomplished, talented bass player. It was a strange comment, but it did not sit well with Sammy Hagar. When that interview came out in June 2015, Sammy got on YouTube and said this.
For Eddie to say he had to show him what to play and had to teach him all those songs, that is the biggest line of bullshit I've ever heard in my life. I was in that band for 11 years. There was never a video camera involved of Eddie showing him what to play. Fuck you, Eddie Van Halen, for saying that about Mikey. You're a liar.
Right. So he was really pissed about that. He does not like Eddie taking shots at Mikey, because Mikey and Sammy, very good friends. Very close. So, It seemed like that year, it seemed like, okay, these guys are not, you know, they already weren't getting along. They're permanently not going to be getting along. But then, just a couple of months later, in January of 2016, Sammy tweeted Eddie on his birthday, said, "Happy birthday, hope you're doing well." And surprisingly, later that same day, Eddie's Twitter account responded, "Thanks, hope you're doing well too." And that was, needless to say, totally unexpected. Kind of on both parts. It was a gesture of goodwill from Sammy to say, you know, hello and happy birthday. And it was kind of a big surprise to hear Eddie actually respond, because Eddie doesn't tweet very much. But yeah, people noticed, and people have talked about that Twitter exchange for a long time, because by all accounts it was the first time those two guys interacted since the 2004 breakup. So it was kind of a big deal. And Sammy's talked a lot about that Twitter exchange for the last, you know, year and a half. Unfortunately, you know, people thought, oh, hey, they're talking online. That means they must be talking behind the scenes too. That means they're getting back together. And that's definitely not the case. Sammy said that since that Twitter exchange, there's been no outreach, no behind the scenes talking, no contact of any kind. It was just a Twitter exchange. That's it. A positive exchange, sure, but nothing more than that. Here's the bottom line. Talk is cheap. Tweets are cheaper. This exchange doesn't mean a whole lot. It's really cool that Sammy reached out, said happy birthday, and Eddie actually responded. So it's not like, you know, I mean, that implies that there's not pure, festering, angry hatred in either camp. But at the same time, it was a Twitter exchange. If you post, you know, happy birthday on your friend's Facebook page that you haven't seen in a while, and they respond, hey, thanks, does that mean you're going to start hanging out with them again? No. But it's nice. It's just kind of a nice thing. And I think this is just that same kind of idea. Another thing to remember here is that Eddie Van Halen is kind of a strange guy. He made some weird comments in that Billboard article about how he doesn't know any current bands, and he doesn't even really like music all that much anymore. You know, he likes to drive with the radio off, even. So there's been a couple of accounts, there's been a couple of stories from behind the scenes, not just from Hagar's book, but other people who've worked with Eddie, and they all kind of corroborate that Eddie can be, not that this is who he is as a person, but he can be kind of a difficult guy. He can be a little ornery, a little cagey. He can hold grudges. And he's made several comments that imply that he does hold grudges for a long time. And I suspect it's very possible he is still unhappy with Sammy over the book, and maybe even going back to the 04 breakup, maybe even going back to the 90s breakup. You know, he might still hold on to all that stuff that he was so mad at Sammy Hagar for. So again, that's a personality factor. Eddie would pretty much have to let go of a lot of old grudges, and if the guy doesn't want to do that, there's no leverage that can make him do it. You know, he's got all the money in the world, he's got the fame, his band is back together, and his son's in the band, his brother's in the band. There's nothing to force his hand. He does not have to come to the table with Sammy if he doesn't want to. And the fact that he hasn't, he's only acknowledged Sammy in a positive way only just recently, after 12 years of silence. That tells me he's not there yet. Another thing to keep in mind about this super reunion is, would Eddie actually want this? Obviously Sammy has reasons for wanting this, but does Eddie? He's already got his hands full with one lead singer with tons of drama. Why would he want to bring in another one? If you go back again to that 2015 Billboard interview, he said he is not friends with David Lee Roth. They don't hang out. They get along, they could play together, but they are not friends. Whatever problems they had in the 80s, at least some of that is still there to some degree. And, you know, even though they've been together now for like 10 years, this reunion lineup, it's not all been smooth sailing. There's been some bumps in the road. David Lee Roth has gone online and made weird, ominous comments about the future and the band. I mean, that's always par for the course with that guy, but still, you know, it's probably a headache for Eddie to some degree. So the thought of literally doubling that with a different kind of drama from Sammy's camp, where's the motivation there? What would make him want to bring back Sammy Hagar? Another thing to consider is that Sammy Hagar has said he would absolutely not come back to the band unless Michael Anthony comes along with. In fact, he said he'd rather see Michael Anthony in Van Halen than he'd see himself in Van Halen. So Michael Anthony is like, that's kind of a non-negotiable thing. Sammy's not going to play unless Mikey plays. The guy who replaced Mikey is Eddie's son, Wolfie. And Eddie has said a handful of times, and I absolutely believe this to be true, is the only reason that Van Halen plays today is because Eddie loves playing with his son, Wolfie. And that's totally believable, and that's totally reasonable. And Wolfie's a hell of a bass player, too. Super talented, seems like a really cool guy, you know, and Eddie loves playing with him, and obviously Alex loves playing with him, too. So they have a unit that works for them. And if a non-negotiable thing about Mikey being in the band is from Sammy's camp, I would imagine one of the only non-negotiables from Eddie's camp would be that Wolfie stays in the band. Sammy suggested that the compromise here would be that Wolfie has his own band with one of the guys from Creed. And Sammy said that, well, Wolfie's band could be the opener. And that would be like the compromise. But that's tricky because playing, you know, opening and then headlining is not the same as playing on the same stage at the same time. So I don't know if Eddie would enjoy that on the same level. That would be, again, something they would have to negotiate. And that might not be a fun negotiation. So again, you have to look to motive from Eddie's camp. Why would Eddie want to negotiate this if he likes what he's doing right now? That's probably his favorite thing about playing. He said it's the only reason the band's back together. He likes to play in the band with his son, you know. So, yeah, that's another thing that makes me think this reunion probably not likely, because it's not even a drama thing. It's just Mikey and Sammy are best friends, and they're going to play together. And Eddie and Wolfie, that's father and son. They're going to play together. And a band only needs one bassist. So what are you going to do? You know, I guess you could have two bassists, but I don't know if that's going to happen. And finally, the last big deal between Eddie and Sammy is that Eddie got sober in 2007. And he has been clean and sober ever since. He doesn't drink anymore. And Sammy has not gone down that path. Sammy has has had a whole second career of selling various liquors. First tequila and now rum. And he's a lifestyle guy. He's like Jimmy Buffett. He still parties really hard. So how would they negotiate that? Does Eddie really want to be around a guy like Sammy who still parties that hard? I know part of sobriety is about avoiding negative influences, so how would they negotiate this? And that's a touchy subject, you know. Alcoholism is not a joke, you know. That would be something that would be really difficult and maybe even painful for Eddie to deal with, especially because Sammy, it's business with him. Like, he is in the party business, literally, so... It's a big clash of now lifestyles beyond just personalities. So to recap the problems between Sammy and Eddie. Sammy wrote a book. Eddie didn't like the book. Eddie said some weird shit about Mikey. Sammy didn't appreciate that. They had a little exchange on Twitter that was positive and nice, but didn't lead to anything. No contact since. Eddie's already got his hands full with David Lee Roth. Why would he want to bring Sammy in when he's got Dave to deal with? Eddie can be a little weird with grudges. And he's, been clean and sober for like 10 years, but Sammy is all about the drinking and partying, so it's kind of like a lifestyle thing. How would they all resolve those issues, and is it possible? I don't know for sure, but, again, if Axl and Slash can, it's not impossible. And as insurmountable as some of this appears, I hate to say it, but, this would be the easy part to fix. The problems between Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth, I think that's where the bigger problem is. So, let's go through a little history here, very briefly. In the 80s, Sammy takes over in Van Halen, and David Lee Roth, every chance he gets on Howard Stern's show, in the media, wherever, takes pot shots at Sammy all day long. Any chance he can. Always ragging on him, all through the 80s and 90s.
Let's go to the tape. Here's David Lee Roth on Sammy Hagar.
Well, Sammy is a mindless little bridge troll drone. Everything that comes out of his mouth is word barf. And it's
right.
Sammy is my boy. He works for me, man.
That's right.
He's my
He's
bitch.
your dog.
That's
He's
right.
your bitch.
Sammy starts to get sick of it, starts taking pot shots right back. So, already some animosity.
I never met Dave, but you got to admit, come on, Howard. I'm not trying to burn the guy. He is really a goofball, man.
So, in 1996, Sammy is out of the band. The Van Halen brothers bring back David Lee Roth. They do a couple of songs for Greatest Hits. They do a couple of TV appearances. And they're thinking it's going to be reunion. But that whole thing goes to shit because Roth came back with an attitude and they start fighting again immediately. So, Roth is out then too. So, in 2002, with an idea that Sammy had back in 1996, Sam and Dave somehow come to an agreement to go on a tour together, alternating who the headliner is every other night. So the tour, again, if you read Sammy's book, does not go well. Lots of animosity between Sam and Dave. Dave continues to trash Sammy through the early part of the process. There's a really interesting interview with both of them on Howard Stern's show from that year where Roth is just a prick all the way through it.
I'm not saying here one's better than the other. I think they were both great. Every record I've
No, Sam, I'm not saying that one era was better than the other either. I'm saying I'm better than you.
Sam's on the phone and trying to be professional, trying to keep it together. But Dave takes some, there's some cuts there.
Going from me to you is like going from speedballs to milkshakes, Sam. I'm sorry.
So when the tour starts, Dave starts playing games. He on nights he's supposed to, play first. He shows up super late, so Sammy's got to go on first, even though it's Dave's turn to play first. Just dumb little games like that. And then Sammy would respond by harassing him to play on stage together, to sing each other's songs. He got some of his famous friends like Kid Rock and whoever to kind of shake David Lee Roth's cage and be like, "Come on, dude, let's do a song together." So this isn't like friendly rivalry. This is mean-spirited, trying to give each other the business, trying to not they're not competing to challenge each other to bring out each other's best, but they're trying to make each other look bad. They're trying to embarrass each other. They're trying to one-up each other. That's really toxic, and that's kind of like the most interaction those guys ever had with each other. And before the tour was even over, Sam starts dogging Dave in the press, calling him unprofessional and ragging him for not doing a song with him. And before the tour's out, they're in separate hotels, separate buses, separate everything. And yeah, lots of animosity, not a positive experience for either one. And certainly not a step in the right direction in building a bridge between those camps. No love lost between those guys. So Sammy and Dave, like, this isn't like Sammy and Eddie repairing a lost relationship, a lost friendship. These are two guys who have never liked each other, who have never gotten along. And when they had a chance to get along, it got worse. Since that tour, Sam's gone basically old habits die hard. He up till last year, maybe even this year, takes little, jabs, little cuts at Dave whenever he can, little jokes, nothing serious, but just little comments here and there to make fun of David Lee Roth for whatever, this and that. I've seen videos of him on stage just using David Lee Roth as a punchline, and being critical of Dave's singing and vocal abilities, and nothing good, but nothing really serious. Just like they did in the 80s and 90s, just little jabs. Roth, on the other hand, and this is weird for him, at least I think it is, has gone totally silent on Hagar. Hasn't said his name, does not acknowledge him. Since David Lee Roth's been back in Van Halen, I don't even know if he's said the words Sammy Hagar in public. The only mention that I've ever found is this video from May 2015 where Roth responded to a question about playing Sammy Hagar songs in concert, let alone doing shows with him or hanging out with him or being his friend.
I'm assuming you're not doing any Hagar stuff. You would never do that, would you?
Well, there's a credibility issue there. Good, bad, or in the middle, Roth means it. The other guy doesn't. And that's why it sold half as well. Literally, Midas, Bible, half. Never did better than half. And why would you bring that into the proceedings? This hamburger don't need no helper. Ain't no rehearsing pants in my closet.
That half comment about the record sales between those guys, that's interesting. I would wonder where he's getting his numbers, because I suspect that is not true. I suspect that those guys are actually a lot closer than either one of them would like us to believe in sales. But I don't know. I don't know what figures he's using, but that would be something interesting to see what data he's actually using. But again, that comment is just 2 years old, and that is not a nice thing to say. So it's not about fixing something that was once there. It's about getting over something that they've never been able to get over. And again, there was a big opportunity in 2002 for them to do that. They could have come out of that as friends, but I don't think either one of them was interested in that. In fact, there was an Opie and Anthony interview that Sammy Hagar did where they brought up David Lee Roth, and Sammy said not only that they weren't friends, but he rejected the idea that they could be friends.
Where you at with David Lee Roth? And the reason I ask...
Nowhere. I've never been friends with Dave. I never even knew him. I went on tour. Him and I went to tour together, and we did huge business, but we never spoke. It would be like, he's a weird guy.
He's a strange guy. I do ask for this reason. You've been on our show over the years many times, and we've had David Lee Roth the last few years. I just feel like you guys would actually really get along.
No. We have nothing in common except being lead singer in Van Halen.
That's a big thing to have in common.
It is a big thing to have in common.
Right. I could see you guys having drinks.
Yeah, I really can't you see that?
Yes.
If maybe you weren't both involved with the whole Van Halen thing.
Well, I'm fine with it. I tried on the
because he likes to have a good time too, man.
He does.
Yeah, you both talk about anything. You both pretty good sense of humor.
Not around me, don't.
No.
Well, and that was September of 2015, just a couple of months after Roth made his comments. So, again, no love lost there, genuine dislike. I imagine that has not changed in the 2 years since. The reason there's so much dislike between these guys is that they are both incredibly competitive, and their legacies are tied together, whether they like it or not. There's no getting away from each other. And speaking to that legacy, put yourself in Roth's shoes for just a second. Why would he agree to this? Eddie might have some reasons to agree to it. He was once friends with Sammy. Maybe he would want to reconcile some things. Maybe he would want water to go under the bridge. Why would Dave have any motivation to do this at all? Why would he voluntarily surrender half of his spotlight to a guy he cannot stand? The fans? Since when has that ever been a serious answer? That's just what bands say when they do anything. You know, whatever they do, it's always for the fans. Let's just suppose Eddie's on board 110% and he's like, Dave, we're doing this. What would stop David Lee Roth from being like, you know what, dude, we've had 10 years of a great reunion. You want to do this thing with Sammy? God bless you, I'm out of here. I've got my money, I've got my fame, I've had 10 years, I've reestablished my legacy. I have absolutely no reason to participate in this. I can't stand Sammy, and you and I aren't friends anyway, so good luck to you, best wishes, but I'm out of here. What would stop him from just leaving? So, as we've seen, there is a great deal of animosity that is unresolved in the world of Van Halen. There is a great deal of mutual dislike that still exists between Sammy and Dave. So this whole idea of a super reunion, I think, breaks on a number of different levels. Who the bassist would be, Eddie and Sammy, you know, getting over their issues, and then Sammy and Dave somehow trying to find a way to get along, you know. All of which I think are deal breakers. I suspect there's more deal breakers that we as fans don't even know about. So although that idea, it's a hell of a good idea, it would be a great time. I would absolutely pay a lot of money to go see that tour, and it would give a great conclusion to the whole Van Halen saga. It would bring closure. It would be a dream come true. It would be fucking awesome. But the thing about life is that there aren't always happy endings, and I don't think that sort of reunion is truly in the cards. I think it's a fun thing to talk about. It's like a wish list type of thing. Like if you could design your own concert, well, it'd have to be both of them, you know? So, yeah, I just don't see it. What I think is more realistic and what I genuinely hope for is, I think, Sam and Eddie will maybe reconcile behind the scenes. Maybe there's a phone call and they resolve some problems and they, you know, get past all the negativity and they become not necessarily friends again, but, you know, they're good with each other. And best case scenario out of that is, you know, maybe Eddie and Alex show up at one of Sammy's big birthday parties and do a song or two with him. But I don't think it's reasonable to hope for anything past that. I think the Super Reunion is squarely in the rock and roll fantasy department. So there you have it. This is my take on the issue. If you disagree with me, or if you have some information that I did not discuss, please post it in the comments below. I think the Van Halen world is very accessible to fans. It's a great topic in classic rock. I would love to hear the different opinions about if you think it's feasible, or even if they should do it, or if they shouldn't do it, you know. So if you like this video, please subscribe. Please post some comments below. I like the idea of going a little more off the cuff and talking about news in the world of classic rock. And if you are just a classic rock fan in general and you're not familiar with my videos, I would absolutely invite you to check out my reviews on artists and albums from the classic rock era. Those videos are much more structured, scripted, bring in a lot more supplemental video footage and music. Lots of good information, lots of fun in those. Please check out that show. It's called Play That Rock and Roll. You can find it right here on this channel. So if you're new, please hit subscribe. Check us out. It would be much appreciated. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time with some more classic rock hot takes. From yours truly. Good night.